Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we have a very special guest. I am so excited that I was able to get him on the show tonight. He's got just years and years of experience, and he's also got a new book that we'll be talking about. And I'm just not going to waste any time. I'm going to go right into it. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Ed Komarek. Is that correct pronunciation, Ed?
That's close enough.
Good. I tried my best. So Ed, I've seen you around Facebook lately, and I noticed your new book out, and then I looked you up on the internet a little bit more, and I see that you've been involved in ufology for many, many years. Is that correct?
Yeah, over 40 years.
40 years. What got you started back then? Because back then there wasn't as many ufologists back then, were there?
Well, there were still quite a few. You know, it started with really back in the 50s, you know, with NICAP and Donald Keyhole and that organization, you know, that fought the cover-up right from the beginning. And then we went through CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, that was started by Dr. Hynek, who was once a debunker with the Air Force, and then was kind of, you know, managing the UFO community, you know, for the benefit of the intelligence community with CUFOS. And then it went on to MUFON. And so I came in, well, I was 17 years old. I left Southeast Georgia to go and Southwest Georgia to go and live and go to college in Fairbanks, Alaska. And same that winter, I think it was about 60 below zero, and the boys and I liked to go down and play pool and drink beer downtown with a line of bars. It was kind of like a frontier town then. And I thought I must have gone out the back door to get a little fresh air, and I walked down this side street and came across this little New Age bookstore right back on the side street, and I looked at it and opened up the door and walked inside, and I just felt right at home, and I really hadn't had any exposure to this sort of thing, and there were books on reincarnation, UFOs, psychic phenomenon, you know, incense burning, tarot cards, and I just felt very comfortable at home, and I started reading this material, and it started putting me through an existential crisis because I started to become somebody that I wasn't before, and I went through kind of culture shock, I guess you would say, and became a very disenchanted and depressed with the way that things were and the way society was, and into a deep depression. And then I went through this experience in which I just wanted to lay on the bed and just fell down, just wanted to, you know, to die. And these like three beings, that I interpreted like dewdrops in the morning, said to me, your path is truth, your vehicle is honesty, and the fuel for your vehicle is love. All kind of like in a thought form. And so I knew there had to be something bigger than 9 to 5 and the way that most people lived.
Right.
And so I decided to do a mental and emotional house cleaning, catch my destructive thoughts when they came up, and let them go, and it's been up ever since. And so I practice different forms of yoga and meditation in order to keep my self, you know, healthy, psychically healthy, and I got interested in the paranormal and reincarnation and out-of-body experiences, and that was a really big picture. And then I kind of narrowed it down to the UFOs because that you can kind of kick the tires, so to speak. You were dealing with something physical, you know, material from crashes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that I thought you were going to say that it all started from a sighting that you had or something. But no, it was completely different than that.
It was a born-again type of experience, the Christians would probably call it, because I became a different person than I really was before. I was really hard-headed, opinionated. I already had taken some hits because I came from the Deep South where I was prejudiced against black people, and I got up there, and a good friend of mine turned out to have been from Kenya, from Africa. His parents worked for the UN, and I started espousing, what I'd been taught from some of the people that I looked up to in the South. And he slammed his fist on the table and wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks. And now I got to thinking maybe I had a problem, and I started thinking it through. So that was really the first culture shock. And then it kind of led on. It kind of led on into this. And so I found out that everything I thought I knew, I didn't. Wow. And so that's a really big shock. So that's a existential, what I call an existential crisis, where you have to come to, you have to leave all your old beliefs have to die, and you have to restructure a new system of beliefs to deal with something that's much greater than what you were before.
Wow. So, you say you got into paranormal first, and then that got you into the to the UFO subject, like you said, just because you were dealing with or could possibly deal with physical evidence. Mm-hmm. Have you had any sightings? Or
yeah, eventually with me, a lot of people have a sighting like you were talking about, and then they get interested. With me, I got interested, and then I just was doing a lot of investigations, and I was involved in where there was some sightings going on and contactees up north of Cairo, Georgia, and I just made a nuisance of myself and walked into a situation where a craft came in, hovered over the trees, and met with a contactee back down in the swamp. And he'd take off down across the fields about midnight, and I was with another lady who was a contactee, and she really wanted to meet him, consciously and whatever. And we got down there in the middle of that swamp, and there were some strange sounds, and it was really strange down there, and she freaked out on me, and so I had to deal with her. And then he kind of comes back out laughing at the way she was reacting because she wanted to meet him so bad, but then when the opportunity happened, she freaked out.
Well, can you blame her? Can you blame her?
Yeah, then I thought, so I saw the craft edge on, and like I say, I was making a nuisance of myself because I had set up my own intelligence gathering network. I'd put articles, letter to the editor, and I picked up some cases and got them printed in the newspapers. So everybody in the area within 50 miles knew about me, and so when somebody had a sighting, usually like twice a week, they would call me about it, and I'd hear about it. And so I was aware. So you have all this collateral activity going on, and a lot of times this collateral activity at the center of it may very well be a contact person, somebody that's having contact. And in my situation, I stumbled into this, and it got the ETs really, weren't prepared for me either. They didn't really. They had some problems of their own. And at that time, according to him, the military had captured one of them, not that particular type, which are small human and barrel-chested, but it was part of their associated group that was more humanoid. And they were torturing and interrogating him in a cell, underground cell loaded with explosives. So if they tried to beam him out, even if they found him, he would be killed. And so they were kind of freaking out themselves. They weren't really paying too attention, and they let me, see their craft come in. And then what happened was afterwards, as I was driving in my drive, I had to drive about 25 miles back north of Cairo to where I lived. I had on 60 acres, and as I was driving in my driveway onto my land, I saw across the corner of the property two of the craft go across the corner of the property. So they followed me home to see where I lived and who I was. And then later on another time out there, he took a cheap camera and shot pictures of me out in this field and asked me if I was feeling anything, and I thought I was feeling a little kind of fuzzy thing. And then he showed me the pictures later, and it showed like a light around me, and he said they were scanning me to see who I was and what I was about.
Now, when was this? What year are we talking about?
This was back before I think I had my first UFO demonstration with Operation Right to Know in front of the White House. It was probably January or February in 1992, and we had a small demonstration there in 92, and the really big demonstration was in 93. So it was one of those years.
Wow.
And so it was about 2 or 3 weeks before that. But it was just a situation that because I was monitoring UFO activity in the area that I just had stumbled into, I actually had a camera with high-speed film I shot the craft with, that nothing would show up on the film, and it was dark, and there was a house on the other side of the field, and you could see the light coming through the windows and everything, and no problem. But for some reason, the lights on this craft did not show up, and it came in as a bright red, like stop sign with dark purple in the center, and as it slowed down, the light got smaller and smaller, and then you could see the craft on the edge, and that light was just very small, and you could see like other lights on the craft, and then it kind of accelerated and went a little further down in the swamp, and when it accelerated, the bright red light apparently attached to the power plant somehow or whatever, because the light it got bigger and then got dimmer again as it came to a stop again.
Now, let me ask you, Ed, because this question has been discussed on my show on more than one occasion, but it seems like a lot of people get into the UFO subject, and they're real gun ho for 2-3 years, and then it kind of dies out and they move on. What's kept you going for 40 years on this?
Well, basically, like I said, the existential crisis was, who am I? What am I about? What is this around me? What's life about? What's really going on here? It's most people are living it like a dream. They are stimulated to do something. They go do it, and they move from one thing to the other. But I kind of stopped and I said, well, what's really going on here? What's life? What is the point of all this?
Exactly.
And so that's what kept me going. And then when you got into the UFO field, and you started understanding the exopolitics, which is basically, goes beyond, that did a UFO crash at Roswell sort of thing, to there's a lot of different types of extraterrestrial races being reported, and they interact with each other in different ways and with us. And so, where is our place in the scheme of things as far as extraterrestrial realities are concerned? So it's a part of the bigger picture, And so what I've tried to do in this book is try to pull together all my knowledge and bring the conversation from, the UFO crash at Roswell to what are the implications of contact that, according to credible whistleblower testimony and contactee testimony, there was official contact with the Eisenhower administration in around 1954, at the same time that the Bilderberg Group was formed in the Netherlands and named after Hotel Bilderberger, which was a group of high-level bankers, global bankers, industrialists, and a sprinkling of European royalty that apparently is set out to create a new world order with them at the top of the pile. And so I think it was no coincidence that all these things were happening at the same time. And so what happened was those that had a lot of power, that their children were in the intelligence community, so this information went up to them right away, and they realized that they had a serious problem on their hands for 3 different reasons. And this was the real reason there was a cover-up. And what the first reason was they could make a lot of money. A lot of these corporations got involved in reverse engineering these technologies early in the 1950s, and so they naturally wanted to keep a monopoly on that technology, and they made trillions of dollars on it, reverse engineering it, like Colonel Corso talked about in the day after Roswell, and into everyday society and also for defense. The second main reason for the cover-up was that these companies like fossil industries like the fossil fuels industry, the transportation industry, the pharmaceutical industries, these would all be devastated by the technologies involved in UFOs or extraterrestrial spacecraft. And so the fossil fuels industry was very afraid that it would go the way of the gaslight companies with the invention of the light bulb if any information got out that these exotic energy technologies that could produce energy very cheap would put the fossil fuels industry out of business. And companies, like Standard Oil and DuPont and chemical companies, Dow Chemical, all these were we're going to have severe problems. And so that was another reason for the cover-up, was to protect the established interests from new innovation and to defend their turf, so to speak. But the third really reason was is that people knew how well some of these extraterrestrial races lived and were organized. They wouldn't have much use for the privileged class anymore, and the Bilderberg people and group and top industrialists and bankers, that control society to a large degree through manipulation of money, realized is that that they would lose their position in society, that people would become disenfranchised from them, and it's like we see what's happening in Syria. Is that once people realize there's a better way of living and freedoms from television and radio, listening about America and Europe and other democracies and stuff, they naturally want that in their own society. But the elite class, like in Syria, is fighting a civil war right now to maintain their position in society. And so the elite realized right off the bat that their whole way of life and of position in society would be lost if this information got out about more ethical advanced races to the general public, and we would want to emulate them. And so what they did is they essentially began a covert Cold War against the lower classes of society to keep them from getting this information or to manage their perceptions as to what was going on while they were themselves getting the best intelligence from the heads of the NSA and CIA and intelligence organizations in England and in Europe and elsewhere.
Now, when did this, you said the Bilderberg?
Yeah, the Bilderberg Group is...
what year are we talking now?
1954.
54, okay.
Same year that witnesses that testified that Eisenhower met with aliens.
Okay.
And so this group, we all, have come to realize, and I've been onto this for a long time as well as other people, that there's this shadow global government that's controlling society and controlling the mass media. It's controlling national security of nations. That's out of control, beyond constitutional government. But we really had never had names and faces and the organizational structure, but it's been hiding right in plain sight, right in front of us. And it's organized through this Bilderberg Group. Now, the whole group is not so much of a problem. It's the core group that is the real problem. Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands has a Nazi SS background, for instance, and he helped found this organization. Okay, and then you have other royalty involved, and particularly German royalty, and these industrialists, top industrialists and bankers, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers in America and whatever, and they all organized through this group, kind of a secret get-together. And the core group is where the real problem is. They're the ones that are out to really on this age-old quest to rule the world. But they have concentric circles of security of people that radiate outward, and so on the outside, you actually have a lot of well-meaning people that think they're doing good when they're being manipulated by the core. And so we're beginning to know who these people are and how they're organized and what they're attempting to do to all of society is create this global world government that's kind of like a old feudal plantation system where we're the servants and the slaves and they're the rulers. But in a kind of an Orwellian manner, it's not really a new world order at all. It's the old world order just repackaged, deceptively repackaged. It seemed like it's new. The word New World Order came from the Theosophists way back from the 1800s. That was supposed to be an enlightened world order, but this is not enlightened. This is more of an Orwellian, control system set up, for that they're trying to control the world with. And so the CIA was very involved in the founding in 1954 of this organization, and then later Dulles brought in through Operation Paperclip a whole Nazi SS intelligence unit against the orders of Truman not to bring in people with bad backgrounds, but he laundered their backgrounds and put out this whole unit into the CIA. So the CIA ends up acting like an enforcement arm, intelligence gathering and enforcement arm of the Bilderberg Group. And then they radiate out, and so like they're controlling presidents, for instance, whether it's Romney was at the last Bilderberg meeting in Virginia, for instance, and Obama might have been there, but Obama had his top economic advisor, and the Treasury Secretary was there, and they discussed in secret world affairs and agendas. And
wow.
And so this is all coming out now, and there's a guy, Daniel Houston or whatever, that wrote a really good book on the Bilderbergers, and there was he sold over 5 million copies, and it's on my Facebook page, and it's going to be turned into a documentary. So the truth's coming out about these people and how they're organized, and this Daniel came at this thing from a completely different angle than me. I've been following the money and following the history, through who's really behind the cover-up. And so interestingly, we arrived at the same place. And so that's why I call this book The UFOs, Exopolitics, and New World Disorder. And people can buy this on Amazon. It's discounted right now, so it's a really good price. Only about the paper copy, print copy is only about $11.50. The full price is like $16, and the Kindle price is $5.
Wow.
And so what I tried to take is I got in and I've been writing exopolitics articles for over the last 10 years, and there's over 200 of them on my blog, which is exopolitics.blogspot.com // or people can just search my name, Ed Komarek, Komarek, and come to my blog, and they can also get in touch with me on Facebook. But so what I've tried to do at the end of my life now is to take this 40 years of knowledge and of information gained and help others to build on my shoulders, just like I build myself on the people that came before me in those books in that little bookstore that I read and whatever, that had a big impact on my life and got me started, and that I developed from. So, I feel it's important at the end of my life to try to pull everything together in a couple of books. And this is the first book in which I pull a lot of information from the blog articles, but I'm doing it in a much better, tighter format, much better edited than my blog articles are. And so people can get a pretty good understanding, of where we're at as far as exopolitics and our exit situation in the extraterrestrial neighborhood from this book. So
let me just stop you 1 sec, Ed. So the name of the book again is UFOs, Exopolitics, and the New World Disorder?
Yeah, that's right.
Disorder.
Yeah.
Just came out in July of this year. And the Kindle version, or the downloadable version, just came out a couple of weeks ago. So definitely, if you're into this type of thing, you might want to go check that out. Now, Ed, what got you into the exopolitics side of things? Because it seems like the people I talk to, they're either into the field investigation, or they're into the exopolitics. They usually don't mix it up. Was there a point in your ufology career that you really started getting into the exopolitics side of things?
Yeah, well, in the 1980s, before the term even became public, which was apparently by Alfred Weber around 2000, 2001, I already had come to the understanding in the 1980s that we're dealing with many different types of extraterrestrial races. Clifford Stone said that he had a little medical book that had some 50-something different races that were in it. And later, time progressed, I've had more sources and contacts come up, which is up to about 120 or more different types of extraterrestrial races that are significantly interacting with this planet. And so I realized there was interactions going on between these races. And having a background as an ecologist, my parents being ecologists, I had a good feeling for ecology is about interrelationships between animals and plants and their environment. So I began to see the same thing in the UFO field, and I really was way ahead of the pack because most people weren't at that point. So I sort of dropped out for a while, in the 1990s, I did a lot of networking on the internet and whatever. But when Alfred Weber, I went back online, and Alfred Weber had come out with the word exopolitics. I said, and so several of us got together and founded the field of exopolitics, so to speak. Paula Harris, myself, Alfred Weber, Tom Hansen, and Michael Sala, and there's credibility problems with some of us. That's going to have to be that's being sorted out as we go along. It's really important to keep credibility in this field, and so I started writing blog articles as I learned and got more information about the different extraterrestrial races and how they were interacting with us, and how the sacred space fleet that had been developed and controlled, out of the public eye, essentially owned and run by the Bilderbergers, this breakaway civilization that Richard Dolan coined, the author of UFOs and the National Security State. A very good book for people when they first getting involved in the field, because it's got a lot of documentation in it, declassified documents, and that sort of thing. So
do you feel, Ed? What's your personal thought on the Truman meetings? It was Truman, right?
No, it was Eisenhower.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, it was Eisenhower. The first that came out was this guy Gerald Light, I think. I believe he was with the Vatican, and he first told about a meeting. And then other people came out about that meeting and other meetings, and I even have a local contact that had actually seen a film of one of these meetings in which three saucers came down over the field, and the extraterrestrials, came into a hangar and met with a bunch of high-level people for 2 days. And my source said in the film that when the extraterrestrial humans, which were very good-looking, in fact, some of the men had to leave because they were snickering too much because of how good the ladies looked in their tight-fitting suits, I guess, or whatever. And so they decided to leave, and the military, according to him, drew guns on them, and they just walked out through the walls of the hangar and back down to their spacecraft and left. And they're the ones that said that were willing to cooperate with the generals and the Eisenhower administration, providing we stopped exploding nuclear bombs, nuclear testing and whatever, and start cutting back, and whatever. And the generals weren't willing to do that, and they were apparently also warned our government that there were other types that he should not get involved with, which naturally they did. The Greys, which have, essentially they sold the abductees down the river with the Greys and allowed them to experiment on the abductees, just like the kings and queens of Africa sold their own people to the white slavers, into slavery for pots and pans and metal pots,
So it's your understanding and or belief that the Greys are not a malevolent. What am I trying to say there? They're not a friendly race.
Basically, they have their own interest, and they think of us as property. Like they've talked to abductee Jim Sparks, and they just basically say they own us. So they're kind of like the slave masters, in the Deep South, that felt they owned the slaves, And so they seem to be involved in a covert takeover. The takeover is not invasion from outer space like in the movies and whatever. In fact, that's a deception, possible false flag that may be happening in the future. But so what we've got here, and that's why I've tried to go through this book and organize all this information in an orderly and whistleblower testimony and contact information in an orderly fashion. That the first chapter of the book, is called Evolution on Other Worlds. So my thesis there is that we don't have to go to other worlds to understand how life evolved on these other worlds, because this life is coming here. That we can if we can study the types of extraterrestrials that are being reported, we can get some insight into natural evolution and artificial evolution on other worlds. And so I start off with reptilian extraterrestrials. I got 2 good cases of that. Terry Hinkle's experience with her sons in the western United States, and then another one down in a cave in I forget or whatever. So I got 2 good cases of reptilian type of extraterrestrials. I've got another case in Poland of an insect type. This is reported by abductees. It kind of looked like a praying mantis type of whatever this young girl saw in a field. And then there's a type that Johnny Sands, the singer, experience that he had with apparently an amphibian type of extraterrestrial, kind of had gills on the sides of the neck, and also a wide variety of human types. And so what we're seeing here, I'm fairly certain that these cases are presenting is that life evolves in a similar manner, in environments similar to Earth, through different stages, like, strategies work, like exoskeletons versus endoskeletons. So if the asteroid that had hit Earth had been, that destroyed the dinosaurs had not happened, it might very well be that an intelligent dinosaur would have evolved that looks very much like the type being reported, and even the scientists have built a model of what a dinosauroid would look like, which is very similar to what some of these reptilian extraterrestrials look like. And some of the grays, even whatever, seem to have a skin that's quite a bit like a chameleon skin or whatever, very small scales. And so then you could think of an asteroid. So you can see that life has a certain strategy, okay, but that strategy gets interrupted by external factors like asteroids hits, okay? So that asteroid that hit Earth, it not only wiped out the dinosaurs, it wiped everything out but the insects, because insects are really tough. Then you might eventually evolve an intelligent insect.
Well, listen, Ed, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us tonight. Just fascinating stuff. And like I said, I wish we could just talk all night, because I'm sure you have plenty that you could talk about. But definitely want to look into this book, UFOs, Exopolitics, and the New World Disorder, available at Amazon. And Ed, thanks again, and we'll be staying in touch, huh?
Thank you very much.
All right, Ed.
Thanks for helping me get the word out.
You've got it. Anytime.
Okay.
Good night, Ed. Bye-bye.
Good night.